Welcome to Reflector Reflections, where we journey through the kaleidoscope of human design, gene keys, astrology, and metaphysics. In this special series, we're shining a spotlight on the inspiring voices of the human design community right here in the land down under. Together, we'll celebrate the incredible work they do while diving into how they experiment and navigate their unique designs. Today, I'm joined by the beautiful Kirsten Morrison. Now, Kirsten is a 6'2" emotional manifestor with the left angle cross of individualism. Kirsten is dedicated to empowering women in business to discover their unique genius and align their lives and careers with their authentic selves. As a human design and breathwork mentor, she combines modalities such as human design, NLP, matrix therapies, and biodynamic breathwork. That sounds good. Just to help clients strip away conditioning, rewire limiting beliefs, and step into their true essence. Welcome, beautiful soul.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
And we were just chatting because how I stumbled across you is actually a very interesting story. And it was through your 3-5 Reflector gal pal.
Yes.
Who stumbled into my awareness, and she's just such a vibe. And then I think she'd been sharing photos about you all. And I'm like, who is this person? She looks cool. And she's here in Brisbane.
Yes. And it was so great because I actually introduced Christy to human design as well. And, really helped her embrace her nature as a reflector too, because I think she had a little bit of resistance around it at first. And, now she's just embraced it. And I just love witnessing her in her signature of surprise so often. Like, she's such a great example of what it looks like to just be fully embodied in her reflector nature. It's amazing.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Before we go into more of that and others, I want to ask you, how did you find human design? Let's take us back. How did you find human design, or human design find you?
Human design definitely found me, and I think that's the case for a lot of people. But initially, I actually found it in 2018, and it was for a workshop. One of the ladies who was hosting it got us to look up one of the arrows at the top of our chart. And when I pulled open the design, this is back in 2018, I just looked at the body graph and I thought, whatever that is, closed it down. I got what I needed to get for the workshop, closed it down and just threw it in the too hard basket. And then fast forward to 2020, when I was making the transition from full-time corporate to full-time business, which I just don't think anyone can truly prepare you for. It's something that you just have to experience. I thought I was ready and prepared. And I probably was to some extent, but then the pandemic hit. I had only been full-time in my business for 4 weeks before we went into lockdown. And at that time, my entire business model was all in person. I was just mainly doing breathwork events and workshops and breakfast clubs and all of these things that were in person. So of course, I was already just finding my feet, baby entrepreneur, and then everyone's pandemic pivoting. I'm having to pull everything online and kind of invent new offers and find my feet. And so I was turning to all of my friends in business at the time, which unbeknownst to me were mainly generators and a couple of projectors. And so I was going to them saying, like, what are you doing? What should I do? Like, help me. And so they were giving me incredible advice that completely worked for them. I was following it to the letter and it wasn't working for me at all. And I was really starting to feel my not self of anger. And I'm like, why is this not working for me? I'm doing it exactly the same as everybody else. Like, why am I not getting the success that they're getting? Like, maybe I'm not meant to be in business. And around that time, human design just started popping up everywhere. And I was really at my wit's end. Like, it was sort of at that point where I was like, I can either just give it up and go and get a job again, or I can, maybe just book a reading, see if there's anything in here for me. Maybe it'll give me some answers and, we'll make some decisions after that. And obviously I had my reading. I learned that I was a manifestor. And honestly, the 3 things that I really remember out of that reading was being a manifestor, my emotional authority, and my 6-line profile. Those 3 elements combined just gave me so much permission, and it just took such a weight off. I've never felt more seen in my life, where I just thought, oh, this is why it didn't work for me because I'm literally not meant to do it like that. And so all of these things, like pushing through my rest period because everyone was telling me I needed to be more consistent and more visible and out there and on all the time, all of these things that I had, internalized as like, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, were alleviated by understanding the way that I was actually designed to do business. And so then I started to experiment with my design personally, and all of these results that I'd been chasing for at least 2 years in my business showed up within the first couple of months of implementing my design. And I thought, well, this obviously works. Let me tell everybody about it. So then I was just telling everyone about it. And eventually I ended up studying human design as well and bringing it into my business. And, it really has become such a focal point in the way that I help others now as well.
Wow, what a journey.
Yeah.
I I really I have a lot of love for the manifestor and the reflector, obviously,
Yeah.
journey. We're at either ends of the
Spectrum. Yeah.
spectrum, I suppose, aren't we? And
Mhm.
and I can really identify with what you're saying about it, to feel really seen. It's just one of
Yes.
those moments for a lot of us that it's just, oh, this is who I am, and you can
Yeah.
kind of pivot
Yeah.
and really become who you are.
Yes, exactly. And I think it was just so affirming to realize the way that I was designed, not only to do business, but to do life and to stop making that wrong. And when I really just started to embrace that, things just took on a whole new level of ease that I wasn't expecting because I had really been resisting and fighting against myself for so long to try and do it like the people that I was seeing around me. And in recognizing the way that I was actually designed to do it, I think the biggest shift for me was a lot of the way that I was working in my business was actually asking. So I was, what do you want to hear on the podcast? If I did a program like this, would you guys want to do it? And it was crickets, obviously. And so that shift into my voice and starting to inform was such a monumental difference in the way that I felt in life and business. And I just felt like my, authentic power really coming online through that. And I really found my voice through that process as well. But people were finally able to feel me. And my work took on a whole new level of richness because I was actually initiating and impacting in the way that I was designed. So it was just such a big piece of the puzzle for me that I'm just so grateful for.
It's a big thing, just, and I don't have lived experience of this. I could only imagine, but
Mhm.
it's such a big thing for manifestors discovering that they're manifestors, because what I hear and what I experience is that journey of life, to have a lot of that suppression when innately you're not supposed to be, to
Yeah,
have to ask permission when really you're designed to inform. So how is young little you growing up, now that you look in hindsight of this, how did
yeah.
that work for you?
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. And my mum, I've obviously explained a lot about human design to her. And now we have a chuckle, like looking back at, how I was as a child, because I was just such an independent child. I'm an only child as well. But my first word was no. So I was just come out swinging, like, nope, not doing that, not interested in that. I'm not eating that. So I just had such a strong no immediately. But I was also, yeah, very independent. When I was younger, I just really didn't sleep a lot either. So mum taught me how to program the VCR. And so I would watch a movie, I'd put myself to bed. Like I just was really a little manifestor. And I look back as well and I really see, even within my friendship circles, I started a club at school and I like directed everyone like what we would wear on certain days. And I got everyone these little rings that we would wear. Like I just was like, even if we'd play Barbies, like I was like, okay, this is the storyline we're doing. This is the character you're playing. I'm going to play this character. It's just very like in that kind of directive energy. But I can also then see how slowly, especially as I was in the schooling system, in friendship circles, how that really got squashed out of me. And it really was, I think, such a big journey to turn that on its head and kind of find a little bit of that little manifestor in me again that had kind of, yeah, had so much rejection and resistance around, my bigness and my fullness and the way that I wanted to show up in the world. And, even as I was sort of transitioning back into embracing being a manifestor, like that really caused some frictions in personal relationships as well. And, a couple didn't survive because it was just the difference then in my energy and texture, and I guess the benefits that they had in the relationship with me to play small was then removed. And yeah, that created, some division in that. And that was definitely, I think, a crunchy part of the deconditioning process for me was, trusting that for myself and really trusting using my voice again and trusting having boundaries again and trusting using my intuition again, and so many things that had been dulled down over years of rejection and resistance that I had really put myself into this small box to be more palatable for everybody else, and sort of start to reclaim some of that energy of the little girl whose first word was no.
Oh my gosh, I'm just impacted by that
Mm,
because I can really feel that. Yeah.
mm,
And for a lot of people, that's a lived experience for them.
mm.
And you probably would have had that as well. I could only imagine, as you were saying, going into corporate. Was that a defining moment for you where it was just like, I'm done. I'm freaking done with this shit. I'm going on my own. Was that an initiation that you weren't like that was this innate part of you coming out?
You know what? I didn't even know about human design when I was in corporate. So I don't think so. And I was really fortunate. I think, my first business that I had, I was 15 and I designed handbags and sold them in boutiques in Brisbane. So I think I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. Both of my parents had two businesses when I was growing up as well. So I really saw that modeled to me, and what that possibility was. But I personally never thought that I was really going to go down that route. I just always thought it would be like a fun side hustle. So even while I was in my corporate job, I had a couple of jobs before I moved overseas when I was younger. But then when I came back, I had the same corporate job for 10 years. And I really had a boss that I think very much unintentionally respected my manifestor energy. And I did have a lot of autonomy in my role, and I didn't feel very controlled or pressured. And she knew that I was, trying to start up all these other ventures. I had a fashion blog, I had a joint fashion blog, I had a label, I had a jewelry, like I had so many things going on trying to make something work for myself. And then I obviously found coaching, and she knew that I was going away to study or going away to retreats, and encouraged that. And she was actually the one that encouraged me to give it my all and step into my full-time job. So I think I was very fortunate in that capacity, but I also do realize like the corporate life was never going to be for me either. Like even though I had a lot of flexibility, it still wasn't enough. Like I still needed to be at a desk at a certain time, and I had certain responsibilities and different things, and there was a level of frustration. I even look back now, the phone would ring and I'd be like, oh, and then like one of my team members would be like, oh, heaven forbid you answer the phone. Like, so it was like, just things like that where I obviously, it wasn't for me. But I was really fortunate to have incredible people around me that embraced me in that process, I think. So even those things were like a funny joke. So, no one really, I think, put that pressure on me. So I was very fortunate in that. But, it still was never going to be a long-term solution. And I was obviously always searching and seeking for something that was going to be my own.
I love that for you. And you know what? I really love hearing about how supported you were. I know that probably you weren't all the time, but
Mm,
it becomes very apparent when you watch the dynamics from a really like above kind of view, and you see
mm,
how we all really support each other, how these mechanics actually work. Just get
yes.
out of the way of the manifest, you know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
allow, and you're watching all these mechanics, and that a full lived experience in the body of how you felt. I was supported, but
Yeah.
I needed more.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And we worked for like our building was technically government owned. So there was certain things that obviously there was, some red tape and things that I sort of had to work around, but I just felt like I could. I just really felt like, and I think that's why I stayed for so long. So many people were like, why don't you get another job? I'm like, I don't think you understand how good I have it, that I can do my job basically with my eyes closed. I have amazing people around me, and I can still have the time to invest in my own ventures. And obviously that was, ultimately the platform that allowed me to be where I am today. So I'm very grateful that I had that job to kind of support me to discover myself, to discover my purpose, and ultimately use it as a platform to leap into that.
And what a bloody initiation too, to start up and then it'd be shut lockdowns and
I
have to
know.
pivot from in person. And but what, I mean, at the time you were like, oh my God, but now can you look back and see this is actually a gift of how
Oh yeah, I'm like, if I could
uh
survive that, and also just like the fact that this economy is what my business was birthed into, like if I'm still standing nearly 5 years later, we can make it through everything. And I look forward to an economic upturn when I'm like, wow, look how good it could be.
so good.
Yeah.
Other things, one of the profile of yours, the 6-2, I
Mm.
always say I have deep respect for the sixth line. I feel
Yeah.
that the journey that the sixth line goes on is something that not many of us can really appreciate or understand. How
No.
has that journey been for you?
Oh my gosh. That was, like I said, honestly, one of the biggest permission slips. Like I said, the manifestor, understanding I was emotional authority, and the sixth line. And I think in that reading, I was just so grateful to understand that, the first 30 years of my life did not go to waste because there was just so much that happened. And, even I remember once I saw a psychic for a reading, and when she first sort of, she holds a piece of your jewelry and she kind of goes into her process. And when she came out, she said to me, I just wasn't even sure if this was one person. Like, I was like, is this like nine people? What's going on here? And then I realized it was all you. Like, this is all your life. And I was like, yeah. So I do feel like, I really have had that kind of stereotypical first 30 years of trial and error. And yes, so much happened in my first 30 years that it really does feel like I lived an entire life in those 3 decades. And then, I have really also then felt this shift coming onto the roof. And I really do see that those 30 to 35 was that transition up onto the roof. And I can also feel from 35 to 40, really feeling quite embedded up on the roof, just how, you really do have that kind of sense of aloofness. And I can also understand why so many, celebrities that, have enormous financial success in their 30s, we don't hear from for 20 years. Like, I can appreciate that kind of desire to just go and hermit on a farm for like 20 years. So, it has definitely been been a really big journey. And I am so grateful that I have the context for understanding the six line journey and understanding that the experiences that I have had, as challenging as they are, really form the foundation of the wisdom that I have to impact others. And I think that has been a really great shift in perspective for me, but also really knowing, even in this phase that kind of does feel like the messy middle, because you kind of know that 50s when things are really going to amp up, so it's like, what can I do in this 20 years to make the most of it, so I'm really ready to go when that happens. And I think that one of the biggest misconceptions for six lines is they're not going to have any success in this chapter, and that's not true. But I kind of see it as, we have one flavor of wisdom that's cultivated in the first 30 years, and then we have another layer of wisdom that's cultivated in the second phase. But the final phase is like the vision I get is, in America, how they have cotillion, where they come down the stairs and get announced into society.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, that's kind of how I feel like it's 50. So it's like we're just coming into the world again in a new way with these two integrated layers of our wisdom in such a bigger richness. And I think Pamela Anderson is just a phenomenal, like my favorite six line example of doing this at the moment. I think she has come off the roof with so much grace and is really modeling what it looks like to live as a fully authenticated human being who has really integrated those two layers of wisdom. And I think, yeah, having that context and having that understanding for the journey has definitely given me so much peace and appreciation for some of the more challenging experiences that I've had in life, and maybe the things that didn't necessarily work out. But I can actually see how all of the things that I have learned in some way, shape, or form continue to weave into the impact that I'm able to have now.
Yeah. And what I've seen and experienced as well is sometimes there can be a lot of pressure on the sixth line to go, okay, well, rightio, now I'm 30. Clearly I'm up on the roof. Whereas it's not kind of a linear process, or even coming off the roof. I'm hearing a lot of, people talk about, I just need a bit more time up here, I'm not
Yeah.
ready yet. And just
Mm.
honoring their own cycle.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. I obviously did not know anything about human design when I turned 30, but I distinctly remember on the morning of my 30th birthday, I woke up and I had this thought, I made it. And I was like, what have I made? What's happened? I just had this sense of like I survived, survived this chapter. And like I said, it really did take quite a few years to then journey up onto the roof, because I can even see, in my memory posts that pop up on Facebook when I see, posts that I wrote when I was like 33, 34, 35. I can see some of that third line, resilience and kind of the courage, the spice, the fire that, I just wouldn't, I'm like, whoa, that's bold, girl. Like, I wouldn't say that now, and it's because I'm so far up on the roof. I'm like, yeah, I'm not interested in getting involved right now. So it does feel like I can see that I still had, some of that third line theme that was, kind of coming out as I was getting up onto the roof. And now that I'm up here, it's like there is this sort of like level of really that observation. I think that, whereas I used to really like want to get in and, add my opinion and share things and be involved. And now I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be involved in everything. Like, I'm just good for a while. I'm just going to watch how this plays out. It's just interesting to see how you're all engaging down there in the house. Like, what's happening down there? Like, so yeah, it is definitely more of the seat of the observer, I feel for sure. I really do, especially having the emotional authority, really ride my wave on things and be so much more carefully considered before I bring things to the world. Even for myself personally, I've been on a journey of faith the last, nearly 18 months, but I'm only just about to share a podcast about that. And so I know previously, I would find something and then just impulsively just go straight into sharing it. And, as soon as I felt like I understood it, I would share it. And now, yeah, there's a lot more of like a really gentle integration process and a careful consideration in what I bring to people through that.
And I've also found that the more we're in this and it gets sort of thrown, just follow your strategy and authority. But when we're kind of really in this space for quite a number of years, seeking that peace would be once you feel it, right? Once you feel
Mm,
that real feeling of peace, or for me, stillness, it's like you crave it. So more, even more than going up on the roof, there's this, I could imagine for you, just this, I deeply require peace in my
mm.
life.
Yes.
And you chase it like there's no tomorrow. You just,
Yeah.
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 There was two types of, it's interesting. I was thinking about this yesterday. 2020 was a huge period of time for people getting reinitiated or initiated into human design. And
Mm,
I found just in the people that I know, also that, coming up on the roof, or that period of the Uranus opposition,
mm.
is another one, especially for women. It's like our identity really we start to see cracks and we're like, who am I? So
Yeah.
I have you experienced that with sorry, that's a little bit of a segue there, but have you experienced that as well, of this journey of the clients that you work with? And there's generally these points in their lives where they're really curious about understanding themselves more. So they're
Yeah.
more drawn to human design.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it is just that, every client that I work with when they discover human design, it is one of those things, the same as my experience, where it just started to show up in their awareness at the time that they needed it most and the time that they really were being called into understanding themselves in a more, individualized way. And I think that, it is just such a really beautiful tool of self-understanding. And, I think there's definitely, I see that it is at a pivotal point, whether it's a transition or, a potential new career or, like me, where it's like, why is this not working for me? And then they find out why. And so, yeah, I definitely have seen that for sure.
How do you, trick question, because I'm sure it's not always the same. How do you navigate the emotional wave? We're it's nearly 70% of the population is
Mm.
emotional now, aren't they? Or
Yeah.
have been.
It's definitely an interesting ride. And again, I'm very glad that I understand that component because prior to understanding that I was an emotional authority, I always thought I was indecisive. And so I would feel the pressure to have the answer straight away. And because I couldn't get the answer straight away, and I was feeling that, like, when you also then you're putting more pressure on yourself, you're feeling more of the turbulence of the wave. And so then I would go and ask everyone, around me, my friends, my family, what should I do? What do you think I should do? And then they would all give me different perspectives. And then I'd feel even more like smacked about by the wave. And so it would, prolong the process. And it's really interesting, reflecting back. I actually had a personal development workshop that I went to. And one of the things that we had to do was ask people close to us for feedback. And I asked one of my friends at the time, and I didn't realize he was also an emotional manifester. But one of the things that he said to me was like, you ask too many people for what you know to be true for yourself, and you're actually delaying the process of taking action for yourself. And that just really stuck with me because then understanding that about myself years later was just so profound. And also, my mum always used to say to me, like, why do you even ask anyone? You're just going to do what you want anyway. I'm like, that's so true.
Mum knows.
But I just, yeah, but I just didn't know. And so I think understanding that, just taking the pressure off needing to have the answer straight away. What I've sort of noticed is that I will typically know straight away, really, like what I'm going to do for most, I would say, small to medium things. I have a pretty immediate response in my body about what I'm going to do, but I still give myself the grace and time just in case that changes. But what I really notice is that sometimes the things that are really going to be a yes, they stay in my conscious awareness, and I'm consciously engaged in that decision making process. And say, for example, if it's investing in a mentor, I'm going back and I'm looking at their page, I'm looking at the sales page, I'm reading the copy again. I'm very actively involved in that. And I continue when I see something, I'm like, oh, yeah, like I'm very interested in this, even if there's a little bit of fear around that decision. Whereas if it's a no, quite often I'll even forget that I'm writing the wave about it. And then like a week later, I'll be like, oh, that thing, oh, I'm not interested. I'll just let that go. So, I've kind of noticed that there is a sense of immediacy for most things, but with bigger things, say, for example, like if I'm going to move house, which I've, like last year was sort of grappling with whether to move or not. And so that wave I knew was going to take time. So I actually started the decision-making process in January, knowing I had to give an answer by June. And so I gave myself 6 months to actually ride that wave. And I noticed in that time, I was like, yeah, I will move. I'm kind of over it. Oh, actually, no, I do really like it. And so I was just kind of going back and forth in that. So I think what I really learned is there's no definitive answer for how long the wave will happen. But I've noticed for things that are life altering, like moving cities, moving to a different place, that's going to require a longer wave. So let me get ahead of it now and just give myself that spaciousness so I don't have to feel the pressure around it. And then for smaller things, it's just requesting that space and time. Like, I'm going to feel into that. When is the latest I can let you know? Or I'm going to feel into that. I'll let you know when I have a decision. And just giving myself that space has been so great. And I think also one of the analogies that I kind of use is remembering that I'm the surfer of the wave, not the wave itself. So if you're getting really tangled up in the emotions of the wave, then you are like getting dunked and crashed and pummeled around by the wave. Whereas if you remember that you're the surfer, you can be an observer of your feelings around a decision, but you don't need to be attached to them. So it's not being disconnected and disassociated from the wave that you're riding, but it's just being more curious and observational about it. And so that allows me to ride the wave like more effectively. And I think also just knowing, if it is a big emotional decision, what do I need to do to self-soothe myself through that time? And, I'm a valleys environment. So lying on the floor is really helpful for me. Like, having a bath, I'm single definition, going out in nature, like different things where I can actually hear how I feel about that for myself. So I've definitely, just really learned to trust the process and know what that definitive yes kind of feels like to me, because I think when you're riding a wave, like there's no full stop necessarily, but there is a point where you're like, okay, yes, I can have faith in this decision now.
I think every human being could benefit from everything you just said then. Of just, not even the emotions. I'm hearing
Yeah.
that going, that is very sage advice for a reflector. But it's very similar, isn't it? It's all about
Yes.
waiting. It's all about
Waiting.
allowing us to take our time and tap into our inner essence of who we are and how it feels for
Yeah.
us.
And also for you guys, like it might not be one cycle, it might be another one. Like take another one if you need it, like if you can, and I think it's just, what does that clarity feel like for you?
Yeah. And I found as well in my experiment, the more I honor that, which you would know too, the more you know how that feeling of this is an actual yes.
Yes.
This is a good decision and how
Yeah.
it feels in the body.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you've got to sort of like strengthen that muscle for lack
Yes.
of that's how it feels for
Yeah.
me. But
I
once you
also,
know that feeling,
yeah.
you're kind of like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
good.
I also think one of the things I have to be mindful for as a manifester as well is like if people maybe ask me necessarily like quote unquote the wrong way that triggers that immediate like, no, I'm not doing it because you've asked me, like, in a way that triggers that not self. I have to also be mindful of like, okay, no, still give yourself the time because it might just be like that immediate aura response and it might actually be a good opportunity or it might actually be a good thing to consider. So just give it a moment for that to wear off and just see where you land with that on the other side.
Imagine do you get that often if someone asks you for something, you're like, nah, but then you're like,
Oh,
hang on a second, that's just, and shit, that's awareness right there
yeah,
of
yeah,
going, hang on a second, that might be just be my aura
yeah.
just protecting me right now.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's not with everybody, but I just notice, like, with some people, or even just the way that I'm approaching time, if it is in a very forceful nature that kind of feels very much like a request almost, or like, I want you to do this, like, will you do this? It's like that is where that kind of just, and it's so like innate and like physiological, like you can't even control it. I just think it's like the inner Hulk. It's like rip the shirt off, the green monster kind of comes down. You're like, whoa, 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 like they don't mean any harm. They're just asking you a question. And it's so funny because my hairdresser is a manifestor as well, and she has been doing my hair since I was 25. I'm 39 now, so we've been on a big journey together. But, I was even saying to her, because she knows nothing about human design, I said to her, if I said to you right now, like, come to the shops with me, or do you want to come to the shops with me? She'd be like, oh, no. And I said, what if I said to you, I'm going to the shops? She'd be like, oh, I'll come. And I was like, that's exactly how it is. It's like, it's just such a funny thing for us. That's just the ask and the tell is just, yeah, it really is something. So I think for me, I've really learned how to be patient with that because, for so many other types, the ask or tell like could actually be really aligned, like, and I can actually really work to their advantage. So I just am aware that not everybody has the same blueprint as me, and it's just, yeah, taking that moment to just take a beat and realize that it's just the not self, and it's just the aura protecting me, like you said, and it's not necessarily the truth. So it's just de-escalating the little inner Hulk and then
I
being
love
like,
that.
okay, let's
You got to put
proceed.
that on a shirt.
Yeah.
Manifestor Hulk.
Yeah, literally. That's what it feels like. It really does. It's so crazy. Like, but also so grateful that I have that awareness so that I know that, that sometimes what feels like impatience or a short fuse is actually not that at all. It's just literally that innate part of our design that, has that immediate resistance to doing something that wasn't our initiation. We didn't initiate ourselves.
Have you like when I first sort of like really got into human design, I mean, I look, who am I kidding? I'm still the same. I'll still talk about it until I'm blue in the face. But I often joke, how many people have you indoctrinated into the cult? Like of your family, have you got them all on board? Your friends? Have you done that? Or you just kind of like, no, I'm just doing me?
You know what? I think at first, and this has also been a really big learning for me in life in general. But, like I said, with now how I sort of am a little bit more cautious about what I'll bring and how I'll share things is, in the past, I used to be vegan for 10 years, like so many different things that I've, had where I've had that immediacy in my passion for something. And I've gone out and just, you've got to know about this and just like so telling everybody and like you said, like initiating people into it, which, as a manifestor as well, it's very easy to initiate people into something that you're very passionate about. So I think, I have definitely had that in the past. And, for a while, like there, I think with human design, it was like every single thing was like, well, in human design, like based on your design and based on your chart, like, it was like everything had to be revolved around human design. And I think I have kind of learned to relax that a little bit and just recognize that if people are interested, they're going to come to you. And that's the best place to really approach people with things. But, I think, yeah, I have probably softened a little bit in my enthusiastic sharing of things, where it's like, yeah, now I just kind of like live the embodiment of that. And, obviously, like if it's a, social platform, I'm obviously sharing things that I'm interested in. And, then obviously the right people step into your space, to be curious about that. But I think, yeah, I definitely. And, like I said, before I studied human design myself, I probably sent thousands of dollars of business to the lady who did my reading because I was just like, you've got to know about this and everyone should know about this. So I definitely have had that period too, but I feel like I've relaxed off that now. I don't make
Yeah.
everything about human design anymore.
And if with me, it's like, even if I do, it's like I might use a language that is very similar, but it's not alluding that I'm talking human design.
Yes.
It's like if
Yeah.
you know the art
Yeah.
of informing, I could again only imagine that it's an art to
Hmm.
learn to do for
Yeah.
a manifestor. I'm hearing.
Yeah.
How does that feel for you now to inform?
You know what? I would say that I'm definitely not perfect at this, and it's something that I still learn, particularly in my personal life. I feel like I have probably mastered it a little bit in business, and what that feels like in business is, like I said, there was a lot of asking in my business model prior, like, what would you like to see? What would you like if I did this? Would you want it? Whereas now I've really shifted that to this is what's going to be on the podcast this season. This is why it's going to be great. This is where you can tune in. It's just really that changing into this is what I'm doing. Because, you know, even I used to do like a lot of market research because that was what you're supposed to do. And then people would tell me what they want. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. Or I'd tell people my idea and they'd be like, I don't think you should do that. I'm like, well, now I'm really angry. Like, you know, so it's just like a whole thing. And so now I just really trust what I want to create in the way that I want to create it. And I just let my audience know. And, you know, obviously not all of them are going to come along for that ride, but I know that more people are going to be initiated by that approach than how I was operating previously, because I really do feel like asking is kryptonite for a manifestor. It really dulls us of our power. Whereas in my personal life, I definitely still find that challenging because I do probably still have a little bit of people pleasery tendencies that I'm still ironing out from, you know, so much, I think, of, you know, personal experiences where you had to ask or, you know, you had to prioritize other people's feelings ahead of your own. And I think that probably has been harder to just say no, or to kind of give people a heads up, or to let them know what I will or will not be available for. That's probably where I found the hardest in the informing, because I've, you know, have such a deep intimacy with people. I don't want to let them down. I don't want to disappoint them. I don't want to ruffle feathers. I don't want to upset them. And so I think that has been definitely a journey and a continued journey of really finding a way to do that in a respectful way that honors the other person, but still really honors me in the process as well. So I definitely feel like that's still something that I'm learning now, but I just have also noticed just really like funny, interesting ways that it kind of shows up in subtle things too. Like, you know, if someone says, you know, are you available for a chat today? Like, you know, it might even just be having that like immediacy of like, yes, let's talk at 9, or like, no, let's talk tomorrow. Like, so it's like, you know, you just kind of, as a manifestor, I think you always then just kind of have to have that kind of initiation, kind of inform when and where that you want to do it. So yeah, I think that's probably how I've noticed that it's come through. And it's definitely still something I am learning and probably will be learning for years to come.
I feel you, friend. We're all navigating these trenches just when we think, just when you think you're sort of like, oh, I understand this now, I can really feel it. And then something
Yes.
will blow me off kilter and I'm like, far out. I
Yeah.
thought
And
I
I think
kind
that's
of,
why it's called an awareness experiment, right? It's like you will just continue to become more and more and more and more and more aware of different things in your reality that you can then think, oh, wow, that's how that shows up. Or, oh, okay, I just noticed that now. Oh, that's how my gate 5 shows up in my fixed patterns. Like just so many things where you just suddenly have this context that you might have always been doing, but just did not have the awareness around it. So I think it is something that you'll continue to develop layers of awareness around. I think even, you know, for me, having an undefined heart, you know, navigating those themes of worth and value, that was something that I, you know, no matter how much personal development work I did, I just couldn't seem to get to like the root of it. And I think even understanding our open centers, to me, it's like, well, I'm actually going to have a relationship with this for the rest of my life. So how can I have a great relationship with this open center, and how can I have more compassion for myself in the process? And rather than be disappointed that I experience the not self of that theme and like, oh my God, the work hasn't worked and I haven't done it. It's like, oh yeah, okay, cool. That's where it is again. What caused that? How can I connect to what I need in this moment so that I can clear it? Like it's just literally so much more of an effortless process, having the awareness around, you know, these different challenges that we're going to face, and also the way that we're naturally designed and some of the things that might be in the way of us doing that.
exactly. I'm just like, wow, are you in my head right now? Because this is a conversation I've just recently had. I've completely opened. Gee, it's the journey that I've been on too. So it's thank you
Yeah.
for just wording that so much better with your defined throat than I ever could. It's so funny. And I was just going to ask you another question there, and it's completely gone out of my head. See what happens when I was. Ooh,
Yeah. Look,
how does that? I was about to say,
I've got a completely open heartness, so I feel you on that, and an undefined head. So I'm just like, that's a story of my life.
it is
What was
the
I just
journey.
saying? How
It
did I
is.
get here? What story am I telling you again?
I know people say that is the art of surrender, I'll often say to people, surrender implies that I'm not actively involved in this, but it is a true sense of just going, it's
Mhm.
okay, just to relax and kind of, okay, well, next, let's move on.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the anxiety.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's, I get a lot of questions around like, how do I decondition? What do I need to be doing? And, for me, honestly, like sometimes just acknowledging it is enough to untangle that knot, just to see, oh, that's this not self. It's come from this center. This is what's caused it. do I need to make any adjustments? For me, a lot of it comes from, being online too much or, spending too much time in comparison scrolls. And so then I'm like, okay, maybe I need to spend a little bit of time offline while I recalibrate, or, maybe I just need to remind myself of the value that I do hold in this moment. But quite often it's just even acknowledging that it's the not self. And I'm like, okay, cool. Great. It's my not self. It's actually not me. I can just move forward.
Yeah. 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 So good. Oh, this
Mm.
gave me tingles. Sorry. I'm just like, oh, your words are just hitting and vibrating into my being. And I'm like, I like that. Beautifully said. How
Uh,
do you, like the work that you do, share with us the work that you do and how you weave this in? I just would love to know if you
Yeah,
don't
so
mind.
prior to studying human design, I already had, a pretty extensive toolkit when it came to mindset and coaching, and I'd also studied breathwork and the body. So I kind of had, the mind and the body, the ability to help people through those lenses. And I feel like what human design has given me is just a really beautiful blueprint to tailor what I was already doing to the individual. And obviously, yes, supporting them to understand their design so they have that awareness for themselves. So I do offer human design readings, but I also offer, coaching and mentoring services where we are, working with the soma and the body, but also working with the mind whilst using human design as the blueprint for that. So having the awareness of like, okay, well, this is maybe why we're having resistance to taking action in this moment because you've got a completely open solar plexus. We need to do a little bit more nervous system regulation work. So it kind of just makes that personal and gives us a context of, that I can pull up on the screen and say, this is where that's coming from for you, so that we can work through some of the experiences of that center. Or, I predominantly work with women in business. So a lot of it is also understanding what their strengths are and, what their purpose is and how they're here to impact their clients. And obviously human design gives us an incredible framework for that, to be able to say, well, this is your strengths. And I think then that creates that tangibility for the mind, which so often forgets when we don't have that evidence. And so then the mind kind of can come on board and say, oh, well, yes, well, our chart says we have this as our strength, so we can believe. And so I think it does naturally help women embrace their strengths more because they can visually see them, but they can also see some of the pitfalls and the challenges that they might experience from the not self or from the open centers. And so I think then we can start to create frameworks within their life and business to really support and hold them through that, but also extract the wisdom that they've gained to be able to support and weave into their offers as well. So I feel like that's kind of how those things have all sort of integrated together. And even when I'm doing, breath work for a client, thinking about, for example, someone with an open root, like the homework or what I would give for them to do after the session would be different than somebody else. So it's like having that personalization to encourage different practices for them to weave in. And, the same even with, obviously my coaching and mentoring clients, we've then got this really tangible framework to be like, well, this is the things that, maybe you need to work on in the next 2 weeks based on this. And, even say, for example, if I've got a client who's really stuck and stagnant creating content, it's like, okay, well, let's get you out in your aligned environment. Let's like bring some of that energy. And so there's just so many different layers that we can work with to sort of support people into alignment and into their creative genius, and to be able to feel really confident doing that too. But then also, because I had so many people coming through my space that were enjoying learning from me, I had a lot of, this is very like two line, I can see like back, the natural, like, can you help us learn human design too? So then I created a human design reader training as well to support women to study it, but also to then integrate it into their business, because most of the women coming through my reader training actually already have, the same as I did, existing modalities that they use, existing business models, and they wanted to weave it into their business. So within that space, there's teachers, there's marketers, there's SEO experts, there's people in corporate that are bringing it into HR. Like, it's such a diverse mix of women who have incredible skill sets already that are really looking to then use that to personalize their impact in the world too. So it's definitely, created quite an ecosystem, but I think it just all kind of, really supports each other.
What a gift you are. Everything that just sounds so delicious. What a gift you are to the world. Thank you for doing all of that, because it is so important, and just helping people. Like, even just knowing, I feel sometimes, even just knowing human design and a type, or just
Mm,
understanding, what you were saying there about the open soul, but just those small things can
yeah.
make massive, massive
Yeah.
differences to people.
Yeah. And I think, the biggest thing obviously is, the women that I work with then feeling like they've got the permission to do business in their way and the permission to be themselves within their business and to start to build sustainable structures that are actually going to hold them. I had a projector come to me that, didn't have any internal energy motors of her own. And she had a completely open heart. And she was talking about having a membership that was going to be very active in her face-to-face involvement. And so I said, membership, great idea, but let's tweak some of the structure so that it's actually able to carry you rather than you having to consistently carry it. So, even just little tweaks like that, that's going to allow that woman to actually sustain her mission in a way that's not going to leave her in burnout and ultimately just abandon the project entirely. So I think, there's different things with the sustainability piece that I think really helps human design in our business, as well as the confidence, as well as the empowerment with that aspect too. And one of the fun ways that I've actually been bringing it in lately is because of my history with being a fashion blogger and being a designer, and I used to be a stylist for shoots and so many different things. I have that, and I definitely, you can see it in my design too, like a very creative component. And so I've started doing HD branding sessions, so like actually creating a mood board for the woman's photo shoot, to actually then take that to their photographer to actually capture their human design essence. So like really extracting like what are the core energies that are represented in their design, and how can we make that visual so that their brand really represents them. So I think there's just so much you can do with it.
I love that.
Things. Yeah.
Oh, a few years ago, I actually was involved, little side note, I was involved in an astrology form of that,
Yes.
branding based on my astrology. Far out. It was so fascinating. And that's why you see like my backgrounds now, even in my environment, because I got a Taurus rising, and it's just
Yeah.
like that, to be able to, this is my environment. I'm a
Yes.
reflector with a completely open G. My space needs to feel safe and
Yeah.
nurturing and grounded.
Yes.
Oh, I love that. I'm so
Yeah.
excited for that for you, because it's like
Yeah.
I got so much out of it just from an astrology side. So,
Yes.
oh,
So often I think people represent what they do in their branding photos. And I think it's so much more powerful to represent who you are. And that was also one of the biggest shifts when I first came into understanding human design, was the first photo shoot and launch that I did off the back of really integrating this into my business. I did a shoot and I actually took my incarnation cross energies to the photographer who I've been working with for years. And I said, like, this is what I want to really bring in to the shoot. And the photos that we took as a result of that, and then the offer that I created, which was my first human design offer. And also my intention for that launch was, I'm just going to be a manifestor. That was literally the only intention I had. And it was, at that stage, like my most successful launch. And so many people invested. Like I didn't even read the sales page. I just saw your photos and I was like, whoa, I have to be a part of this. So I think there's so much power in representing who we are in our visuals too.
it's energetic as well, isn't it? When we're
Yeah.
sort of honoring who we are and we're stepping into that power, for lack of better words. But
Yeah.
oh my gosh, it's just so incredible. And you feel it within yourself. Oh, I love
Yeah.
that. I got tingles again.
Yeah.
It's so delicious. I want to ask you one more question before we wrap up, because I know we've been going for a while. Do you have, like, do you attract a certain type to your aura?
I would say mainly manifesting generators. I have a ton in my space, and I think probably then the next would be projectors.
Yeah.
They're probably the
Yeah.
two main that I get. But yeah, manifesting generators by far.
Yeah. Well, there is a lot of them, I suppose. But
Yeah. But I also think, sometimes I probably appear to be a manifesting generator myself because I'm like, I've got so many different things on the go all the time. And so I think probably, yeah, there is that probably like reflection in the
yeah.
manager. And they're like, oh, she's got all these things going on. I have all these things going on. So yeah, I think definitely, yeah, there's probably a bit of resonance there too. And maybe that's also my like envy sometimes of the defined
Yeah.
sacral.
They're good.
I'm just like, come into my space, let me borrow it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I could imagine for them that you feel like empowering for them.
Yes.
I could imagine
Yeah.
that that would
Well,
be a
there is a lot
beautiful.
of similarities still
Yeah.
between the manifestor and the manager. And so, yeah, I definitely feel that too.
I always, I have a predominantly a lot of manifestors in my life.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah,
And I think it's a safety thing. I think for them, they
totally.
feel safe.
Yeah.
Um, that they don't have to do anything with me.
Yeah.
It seems
Yeah.
to be a common theme. So it's just like, okay, come on
Yeah.
in, friends. I feel safe with you too, and we can just sit here.
Yes, I know. And I often feel that even just I've really noticed something really interesting is, when I am around, my sacral friends, because obviously they're really enjoying the interaction and their sacral's gaining energy and they're like, let's continue, like, let's go do this now. And I'm like, absolutely not. I'll see you later because I've run out of energy now. But, with my non-sacral friends, I think there is kind of just this much more like mellow frequency that kind of comes through. And you might have like 2 hours, 3 hours of like fun time hanging together. And then there's just this really rapid shift I've noticed in the environment where you're just both at the same time like, well, that was lovely. I'm going to go now. Like, and it's just the same thing happens. It's just so hilarious. Whereas, like, I went out for dinner a couple of months ago with two generators at a Manigen. And after dinner, they were like, let's go get ice cream and take a walk. I'm like, I'm going to go to the car. But it's just like, they were still, running high on the interaction and had energy to keep going. But I was like, no, I'm done. But, even with that, prior to knowing, and I think walking through a lot of my own conditioning, I would have probably forced myself to go and felt like I was missing out and had the FOMO. Whereas now I'm like, no, I'm complete. Like, you guys have fun. You go do that. I'm going to go home.
Me too. I'm always known for skiving out early now, and it, when in this experiment over years, it's like I still felt a bit of shame and guilt around it, but I'm like now it's like, and I have it. They have a joke. My friendship circle calls me 11th hour Annie
Oh my
because
gosh.
I now honor that and just go. I'm not going to commit to anything till the
Yeah.
11th hour, and
Yeah.
even then I may change my mind.
Yeah. I'm also the same. I completely understand. I'm like, when is the latest you need to know? 1 minute before the event? Okay, great.
Because you just don't know.
You don't know. Anything could happen. And it's highly likely I probably won't feel like it since I'm a manifestor hermit on the roof.
That's right. Just
Yeah.
leave me be, friends.
Yeah,
Leave me be. I love you
literally.
from
I'm
afar.
happy at home. Yeah. And I actually think a really cool example of this is I love the Kardashians and I watch their show, but Khloe Kardashian is a 6'2" and she's 40 now, but Kim K is a 3'5" generator. And so, she's out in the world and she's having these experiences and she's always trying to pull Chloe along for the ride. And she's like, there's an entire world outside of Hidden Hills. Like, leave the gates. And Chloe's like, I am good at home. Like, leave me alone. Like, I love it here. Like, I don't need to go anywhere. And it's just so funny seeing those profile dynamics really come out because Chloe's on the roof. She's a hermit. Like, she's good at Hidden Hills behind the gates, like in private. But Kim's like, let's go out in the world. Let's have adventures. Let's have discoveries. And there's just such a clash there. It's so fascinating.
I love those examples when you can watch something and then you can share like that. That's cool. I
Yeah.
really enjoy that.
That's honestly one of my favorite ways to learn human design is just to pull people's
Watch.
charts up while I'm watching, any documentary, anything. I just find it such a fascinating case study.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take that on board, people. Anybody who listens to that, that's a great tip.
Yes. It's so
How can
fun.
how can people find you? How can they? I'll share the links, of course, but if you'd
Yeah.
like to share what you're up to, that would be lovely.
Yeah, beautiful. So the easiest way to find me is either my website, kirstenmorrison.co, or my Instagram, also kirstenmorrison.co. That's obviously where I spend the most time online. So yeah, if you want to reach out and share anything or connect with me, you're more than welcome. That is an invitation to a lot of people that need it. I feel like with the Manifestor aura, it's like, oh, I won't bother her, but my DMs are open. You can totally contact me. I'm opening the auric door to that invitation. But yeah, I think basically like you'll see all my offers on my website. So it depends on what you want to do. But, like I said, human design readings, human design reader training, mentorship. I'm getting back into in-person events next year as well. So you'll be able to see and stay on top of all of that when you, see me on the Instagram or my website.
Thank you so much. Thank you again for gifting me your time and space and energy. This has been a beautiful conversation, and I'm
Oh,
looking
thank
forward
you
to
so much for having me.
connecting with you. We're in the same city,
I know. Are we really?
Brisbane, North
Oh
Brisbane.
my gosh. Yes. Amazing. Well, I'm at the Gold Coast now, but still like not.
Oh,
Yeah.
boo.
Yeah. Not too far. Still very close.
Oh, lovely. And how's that been for you moving from Brisbane to the Gold? You were in Brisbane, weren't you? Or am I
Yeah, I was in
imagining? Yeah.
Brisbane. Yeah. Yeah. So I moved to the Gold Coast like 3 years ago, but yeah, I really, really enjoy it. I don't get into Brisbane as much anymore that I'm here. So I just, felt like I needed a shift in energy. So yeah, I like it. Yeah.
Well, I'll let you go. Thank you again, beautiful So. It's been so beautiful to chat with you, get to know you, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you more over the next duration of time.
Thank you for having me. You too.
All right. Take care.